I'm now joined on the stage by Shaminda Nahal and Kemi Anna. We've also been asked to describe ourselves for the visually impaired. So I'm Franki. I'm a short, blonde person who looks a bit terrified right now. And Shaminda, would you mind just doing the same?
Sure. I'm a short Asian woman with a black dress with a gold print and white shoes.
That's good.
And I'm a dark-skinned woman with an afro.
So Shaminda is head of specialist factual at Channel 4, and that's a department that covers everything from SAS Who Dares Wins to series like Investigating Diana, or singles like Grenfell, The Untold Story. She also runs the short film strand Random Acts, and she's one of the commissioners of Black to Front, a Channel 4 programme. Kemi has a film in the reel. She's a filmmaker, writer, producer, committed to creating visuals that share diverse experiences. She started out as a photographer and studied advertising, and we'll come back to that in a bit. And she screened her debut short in collaboration with Converse and John Boyega. And as I said, as above, was nominated for Best Experimental by the BFI Future Fest. So thank you so much, guys. I think collectively, and certainly here in Margate with the whole festival, there's a commitment to new talent. So maybe you could just tell me about being new talent and how you actually kind of broke into the industry, even to get to make films and work with John Boyega. How did that happen for you?
So as you said, I studied advertising at Ravensbourne Uni. I graduated in 2020, so in the pandemic, which was a very interesting experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, while I was on the course, and a lot of it was coming up with concepts which I really loved, but I was still very much like a maker, and I did photography, and I just did styling, and I kind of just tried a bunch of things to see what felt comfortable. And then in our final module at uni, we had this brief in collaboration with Apple where we had to tell the story of an unsigned artist, and my group, someone from my course is here today, and we decided to tell the story of an unsigned artist called Shemaya. Mm-hmm. We did it through a mini docu-series, and when we did that module, it felt very I was directing. I felt very natural. It felt kind of like a culmination of all the different things I had tried to do. And from there, I kind of started working in music, so I did a lot of music videos, and I still do a lot of music videos. It's the majority of what I do, and then went on to do narrative and branded content. Yeah.
That's awesome. So Shaminda, tell me about Random Acts as a programme.
So Random Acts, it's Channel 4's short art film strand, and it's been going for a number of years now, and all sorts of amazing people have made short films. And I guess it's unusual for a sort of main public service broadcaster to have something going on like that, but the purpose of it is really to give an interesting sort of opportunity to particularly new talent, all kinds of different sorts of people. We're interested in other voices coming into the industry. And I guess what's sort of quite freeing about Random Acts is that they are meant to be really sort of artistic films, so they don't have to be sort of weighed down by the pressure of anything really, a message, a sort of clear narrative. They can just be beautifully expressive and kind of quite out there and quite crazy. So for the creative people who get to make them, it's a really lovely opportunity because it's kind of unfettered. Mm-hmm. And so we are really proud of it, and lots of people who've made Random Acts have gone on to make documentaries for Channel 4 or other kinds of work, and indeed sort of in the wider creative industry. So when you kind of look into who's been there, very much like in your projects, you'll find lots of people started there, so that's exciting.
Yeah, it's a sort of breeding ground for talent.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you both this question, but what do you think the biggest barriers are to kind of getting to the point where you can make a film for Random Acts, or being able to you funded your short film yourself, but what do you think the barriers are in terms of getting to that point for young people?
I think accessibility, or knowing someone in industry or finding that way in. I think it can be quite difficult. Before I went to uni, I had no idea that I could do advertising or filmmaking. It just wasn't one of the options that were presented to me. So I think that's like one barrier, like not even knowing.
Network. Yeah.
But also like once you know, I think it's advertising is quite difficult, I think, to get into. Obviously it's much more open now, but it's tricky if you just don't know how.
Yeah.
But I do feel like for me, because I studied advertising and I've kind of gone between the two, it feels a little bit less rigid to like be one thing. You can kind of move between the two and figure out as you go along. So yeah.
So that's something that I've really been observing, and I make films as well, so I sort of juggle, I straddle both worlds in a way, and I feel that over the years I am observing those sort of barriers breaking down a little bit. There's like almost like a little bit less snobbery in terms of like you have to keep your kind of IMDb pure to make your first and perfect film, and somehow you've got to sort of just suffer until then. And like, you know, as I mentioned before we introduced The Reel, like people like Ray and Miller being able to make the transition into like a first-time feature that's really commercial, you know. And it's interesting that you're saying advertising felt tricky. Is that just because there's a client, or?
No, I think it's like, so with the film that we're showing today, it was self-funded, and it was like I could kind of make stuff, or like a lot of music videos have been my entry to
freedom,
narrative filmmaking. But obviously with advertising, you need someone to fund, like you need a client.
Absolutely.
So it can be a bit trickier that way, and obviously there's a certain level and stuff.
I think that's why we're trying with this year to actually give more guidance around how to pitch and how to get, you know, create a network out of the people that we put on The Reel. Because Random Acts and NCS are amazing showcases, but people need to work. People need to work, and I think we've got to start opening our doors to that and actually making it less like you have to understand the process and already be repped, and, you know, in order to get a commercial opportunity.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any change in that, in terms, because obviously you're a commissioner?
I think it's really interesting what you're saying, and also really important, and what you're saying as well, that in TV, I haven't worked in advertising before, but in TV, I mean, it's a huge conversation, right, about who gets in the door, as it were, into this industry, whether it's inside broadcasters or in production companies. Who's making all our programs that we're all watching? Is it representing everyone in our country from whatever background they are? And we all, I think, agree that we need to have, we need to be reflecting our stories back to each other. All of our industries, we want to be much more open, and we all know we've got a long way to go. There's all sorts of things that are being tackled within TV, and we are making bigger steps now to genuinely represent more people. But we have got a long way to go. So things like this, I think, are important, because we're sort of trying to make a different sort of one film, one story at a time. Yeah. But I think your starting point is really interesting. I think there's so much visual culture around us, whether it's on TikTok or fashion or what everyone's wearing, what they're watching, how they're watching it. It's such an interesting mixed palette of the way that we see the world and see things, that I think that's why I think we're seeing all these different ways in now. So whether it is through advertising, or whether someone's made a TikTok, or I don't know, made a dress or made a print or made a painting, all of these things can feed into our creative output. So I mean, in recent years, there's an amazing documentary film about black hair, which was really beautiful. Actually, it was funded by L'Oreal, and the director of that came from theatre, Nicole Charles, and she brought a completely different, really interesting vision and an interesting way of constructing the scenes in the way she directed. Of course, people from advertising bring a wonderful visual language often, and sort of identity, maybe use of music. People who've made music videos. I mean, it's all part of our rich culture. And actually, I think in Britain as well, I think we're really good at synthesizing things from different places. So I, like you, hope that this sort of cross-fertilization continues. I think it's a really good kind of openness. And I think it's also true to the way we all live and sort of consume culture as well now.
Absolutely. when you worked with Converse, you've done quite a bit of branded content. What do you think the main differences are when you kind of go into kind of a more commercial space?
I mean, I think, of course, there's a brief.
Yeah.
There's parameters that have been set by someone that's not you, which I think is really beneficial. I really love that. From studying advertising, I take that into my filmmaking, kind of being a bit more structured with the way that I work. But with working with Converse, that was a very creative project because it was a narrative film. So kind of having the balance between working with a brand, but also working with a concept that completely came from me and from personal experience. I think it's really nice to see how the two can work together. Because I know so many of the narrative film makers that I know now, a lot of them did start in advertising and then either make the full transition to just be in narrative film or kind of work between the two. I feel it's so nice that we can kind of choose and do both.
When I chatted to when we launched in Canberra, we chatted to Rain, and the biggest thing that she said was it buys you time to get your story right as well. So you don't have to, because a big part of film development and TV development is the time it takes to get the project right and ready. And so to be able to to be able to go off and do a commercial and still be working and still be be living. I think that's just it's quite fundamental, but it gives people the time to get the projects right and to get them in front of the right people as well.
Yeah, but also, and I think, it's so important, the accessibility point. Not everybody has the resources to be able to, fund things of scale, to the standard that might be seen as kind of the right standard or whatever. So I think just, as you say, being able to work and get stuff done that can kind of showcase your talent is really brilliant. And then I think you can kind of develop in different ways, can't you? There might be, you might then want to go into documentaries and work on films for Channel 4, say, where then the story becomes more important maybe, or the purpose becomes really important. So obviously, we as a public service broadcaster, the remit of what we're meant to offer in terms of our content sort of meaning something, saying something about Britain, asking challenging questions about what's going on in society. All of those things can offer a very different opportunity for a creative person like you, and it's possible to have those different parts of your personality and creative output, right? So
exactly, and hone your skills and bring people with you as well, because it's not just filmmakers, it's directors of photography, it's musicians, it's we need advertising to almost to bring people through as well, and to train people as well, and to create opportunity through the line. So I think. But
can I ask you?
Of course, I'd love you to ask me a question.
Do you think because I always feel as well that Britain's had an amazing talent of a track record of talent moving on. So I mean, everyone always talks about the Scott brothers, don't they, and Ridley Scott, for instance, and there probably many others, and even people who come from advertising into writing novels, or the influence of advertising is huge in terms of our culture. But what is it about now that you think is making it feel kind of full of energy? And
I think there might be just more things being made. There's more, when I first started out in film, even film and television didn't really converge at all. It was sort of we would be a bit snobbish about just telly. Be like, oh, I'm doing some telly titles, but really we're doing the film stuff. And that compared to now, in terms of the reputation and the craft and the amount of TV that's being made. So I think there's just more opportunity, first of all. But I also definitely think and you're absolutely right to talk about Ridley Scott and Alan Parker and those famous people that came through the 60s and 70s from advertising into film. And then I think it just became not cool. And now I think because there are so many more formats in ads as well, like you're saying, branded content, long form, L'Oreal sponsoring documentaries. There's much more of a sense of I don't know, even people like Spike Lee must have made a huge difference, sort of going in and blowing the doors off what Nike could do from an advertising point of view, and seeing those things being really credible. So that's my point of view on it. And also, in a funny kind of way, it's also just that we're all a bit closer as an industry, so that when you, because your whole thing is it's a network, right? And if we're all really siloed, that's why it's important to do this kind of thing. But I think because more directors are working across both medium, the DPs, the musicians, everyone has like networks that are kind of really cross-pollinating now as well. So I think that's part of it.
But I think some of the snobbery might have come from the idea that, and this, I don't think this is true, but I think the sort of, that in advertising, possibly there might be certain kind of styles or techniques or forms that get used a lot and that maybe don't sit well with documentary. So I think that is a kind of cliched view. And now I think that everything's changed so much that young people in particular are used to such a range of sort of visual palette that a lot of our visual culture is kind of interchangeable now, isn't it?
I think that's a great point. Yeah. I think like someone like Edgar Wright, who's just done a massive McDonald's ad, you know, and is sort of coming back to advertising because it's fun, you know, and like his visual sort of sensibilities do lend themselves to much more dynamic content creation as well. Yeah, I think we are digesting on different mediums, and we expect more techniques. It's not as purist as it maybe was. So probably final question for you both. What stood out to you on this amazing array of talent today, apart from your own, of course?
No, there's so many that I loved. I really love, like, because I work so much in music videos, I always feel like heavily inspired by them. So obviously the last one, Ants Live, incredible. And the very first one, which was, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was the cinematography was gorgeous. But also the film that was, I think it was called The Gospel According to Gail.
Yes.
It's hilarious. I just think it's so important to have things that are just funny, and they don't have to be like overly deep or but just humorous. But I loved, like, the whole reel is amazing. It's like incredible to see like the new filmmakers. Like, I feel like it's an amazing starting point.
You're in great company. Yeah.
Yes, I feel very proud to be amongst everyone there.
I mean, I agree. Yours was obviously the best. No, they were all the best. But I think there was a really interesting sort of like some quite epic visual scenes and then some quite intimate scenes, quite a lot of playfulness. It did feel like we got a lovely picture of lots of sort of bits and pieces of contemporary life. I think the animation was one that will sort of stick in my mind. I'd like to watch a few more times just because it felt so, it sort of felt familiar but also unfamiliar. And you did feel like when you were watching it, you were suddenly immersed into in that world of the sort of people in washing machines. And it felt like quite a sort of dark, satirical take on, you know, family life and pressures on women and patriarchy and stuff. Apologies to the filmmaker if I'm not getting it right, but I thought that was really intriguing and stays with me. But it's fantastic to see the range of work.
It really is. I'm going to do a shout out for Bullet Man, which I absolutely love.
Oh,
Chase.
yes,
It's just such a clever idea.
Oh, so good.
Yeah,
really good.
Anyway, well, thank you all for being here. Thank you guys so much for the chat. It was awesome. Have a great festival.